Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 15. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm getting cinema open here. I spent over an hour with tech support on the streaming software, and we were going over all these different settings and updating things. Although, unfortunately, we went and updated drivers, which is always dangerous, and we updated Windows all the way, which is always dangerous, and now my Premiere is behaving badly. And now I just opened up Photoshop, and it was like, oh, your scratch disk is full, and it's trying to put me in a different one, but wouldn't let me change a checkbox, so I wasn't able to update the graphics and everything all the way in the last second, but I think everything is working. Hopefully the live stream runs smoothly. Let me know if any issues with video or lag or audio. But the main thing is that I don't want it to be freezing up on me, which has been a big problem. It froze up several times when Jess was a guest last week, and we can't have it freezing up. It's just no good. I mean, it would be better on Twitch because Twitch can pick up the stream again, but YouTube can't, and it dies. Mic volume seems lower than usual. Somebody else says it's fine. It's pretty much set up the same. Other people are saying perfect. It could be lower than usual. I don't know. People let me know if it seems to be able to get a consensus, but as far as the app is concerned, it's showing full volume. Anyway, I hope everyone is doing well. It's going to be a completely standard episode. Looking forward to some questions. We can tackle pretty much anything we want in cinema. We've got somebody saying, yeah, other people are saying more quiet than usual. Let me take a look at the audio mixer. Literally, it's as high as it goes. It's at 100%. But they completely changed the interface with the new version and everything. So maybe there's additional variables, but I literally cannot put it higher, and only software stuff changed. So I don't know. I don't know. Nurpara is asking about making a chocolate dripping. We can take a look at some stuff possibly. But anyway, let's throw out the rules really quick. Questions. If you have questions that are a link, make sure I can see the artist or studio who put it together. If it's a link to a video, I need to be able to, well, tell me what the time code is or the specific effect, because oftentimes there's more than one. If I can't see the artist or studio's name, then I'm not going to tackle it. I want to be able to give credit. Otherwise, it has to be a very abstract question. You cannot put links on YouTube. You can only do it on Twitch. So if you want, you can head over to the link in the description and go to Twitch if you want to post a link. But I do like typed out questions. So start getting those questions together, everyone, and we will start tackling some things. Let's see. Once again, don't feel free to repost a question again if I don't tackle it right away, because often the chat will go by and I won't see it again. And just don't spam it. If you spam it, I will not answer the question, and if you spam it, there's a good chance you will get at least temporarily blocked. So don't be mean to the chat. But yeah, let's check out what everybody's talking about. Yeah, chocolate dripping, we definitely think about that. But I want to see what the rest of the chat is saying. We've got questions coming in from on Twitch. But you know what? Para came in with the first question about chocolate dripping. I think that sounds kind of fun. Let's see what we can do. So here we are in S24. If you want to be more specific, Para, about the way you would... first of all, Marcel, there's a good chance you're trying to put a link and that's not going to work. You have to go into Twitch to post the link. Thank you very much, Ralph. I got to set up like the proper like partnershipy type thing so that people could like support the stream while it's streaming and whatnot. That'd be cool. But anyway, Para, if you got more specifics of like what you are intending, then let me know. Now, we did a couple of things along these lines. Actually, you know what? Before I start, I'm going to turn the lamp down a little bit here. It's kind of blinding me, and it's at that perfect temperature where it gets hot when I start streaming because all the lights are on, but it's not hot enough to turn the air conditioning on. So give me a second to turn the light down. That's as low as it can go without turning off. Anyway. Para, you don't have to type in all caps, but I appreciate if it's for getting my attention. Oh, I see. Okay, that's yeah, that's definitely different from what I was going to do, but I'm not against the idea. So the idea is kind of like breaking a chocolate bar in half and then doing the stretch is the question. that's coming in. So I'm fine to try and tackle something along those lines. There's two things that we could do. We could just, let's worry about the specific rig, because that's the important part. Now, what are the tools that we have in Cinema to allow something to stretch? Well, certain dynamic things, possibly cloth, possibly soft body. But in my mind, our best bet is going to be using joints. That is the most controllable setup that we can do here. So doing this in the simplest way possible, I think. Let's make our incredibly low poly chocolate bar. I'll make this editable. Scoot this over 100. Is it 100? Yeah, 100 units. And then make a duplicate and scoot it over 100 units. So now there's our chocolate bar. Maybe we'll spend some extra time and render it and make it look pretty. Maybe we can make some materials. I don't know. But let's just worry about the mechanics right now. So we have left and right, and we're going to stretch it out. We would definitely put different layers in there, but my main concern right now is getting a stretch. So we're going to need character tools. I'll make a joint. What I usually do, actually not the joint tool. You can use a joint tool and kind of draw them out, but typically I will just make a joint and then drop it as a child of itself and a child of itself and a child of itself, and just make as many as we need. In fact, let's go a little bit overboard. So we've got a bunch of them, and then selecting all of them, I can say, okay, I want each one, not the first one, but I want each of these to be, let's say, 10 units away from the first. They're not showing up in my viewport because by default I have joints turned off. So there we go. We have a whole string of those. Now, let's just make them 5 units apart, because the stretch, I don't think it's going to be too long. Excellent. And I'm thinking, let's do this with a spline IK. Yeah, I think a spline IK is going to be the way to do this one. So, yeah, this is going to be kind of like that perfect halfway point between being controllable and allowing dynamics to do certain things. So, IK spline, and that wants to know the end point. So we'll put the end. So now it's going all the way from the start all the way to the end, but that needs some sort of spline to be based off of. Now, a lot of things we could do with a spline. We could convert this entire thing into a spline, but I think I want this to only be 3 points. So let's see, how do I want to do that? If we create a end side and we set the end side to be 2 points, it'll make a perfect line. If we make that editable, you see it's open and it just has a point on each end. So selecting all the points and then saying subdivide one time should create exactly 1 extra point right there in the center. And then I would like this to be a Bezier spline, so I get the handles. So that should have made this pretty smooth overall. Excellent. So that is the spline. So in our IK spline, I want that to be the spline. And I want it to fit. Yeah, I think fit is the correct one, although it seems really short there. Is fit not the correct one? Equal? Oh, I guess equal. That's kind of named opposite of what I was expecting it to. But let's go ahead and add some handles, which is just 1, 2, 3. You need exactly as many handles as you have points on your spline. So that should have, and then we say create, 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 which is going to create 3 nulls. So we got right, mid, and left. Now, here's where the advantage of this comes in, is now I should be able to take these and move them around. We get all this nice motion. So we get that midpoint. Now, just to make it very visible to control them, why don't we make a couple of controls here? So making a end side is my usual go-to. We'll make an end side, and when you're doing a character, I always forget, is it like, usually it's like red on one side and blue on the other? I'm trying to remember. Because I can't remember, I will just open up a character builder and roots, spine. No, 3 spines. Give me an arm. Blue. Okay. Just trying to follow some sort of rule here. So the right one shall be blue. And that one can also be right. And the left, well, the mid is usually yellow or green. And this one shall be red. So once again, mid, and left. Just staying a little bit extra organized. If I select each of these, I can click the Reset PSR button. Unfortunately, they renamed it to Reset Transform and changed the shortcuts and the ability to hit Shift-C, but I typically just click the button now. So you can see that zeroed out onto each one of these. Now, we should be able to just move these into their start position, and what's going to be nice is all of the spline will scale to match. So mostly what I would like to do is make this a child of the left bar. So let's see. Yeah, that's the left candy bar. And that one will get the left object, and I would like to zero it out. So it's zeroed out, and then the right one will go into the right, and I'd like to zero out its position as well. So that's all zeroed out, and the mid doesn't, it just stays floating. In addition to that, the handles are probably going to be pinched really, really strong, so those are things we need to control as well. So you'll see here under the handles that we get these nice long handles, but when it's all squished in at 0, we probably want them to be 0. But anyway, the super basics are is if I just grab this bit of candy bar now and start to pull out, you can see that we have a straight line. We have a line connecting between them, and hopefully if I grab this midpoint and I move it to, that makes sense. I need to, currently it's left, mid, and right, but I needed to relink them to the splines that we made. Mid and right. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now you can see that as I grab this bit of candy bar and I move it around, that we get this nice midpoint. Now, it doesn't look like much by itself, but once we start animating these handles a bit, so I can pull this out, and we could even give this a little bit of straight line there and a little bit straight line there. Like that starts looking a little bit gooey. So we get control over the way those are going to look. A couple things we could do in addition to that, if we wanted it to be fancy, we grab this midpoint, which is the 0 point for this. And the reason I like doing this is I can grab the midpoint and move it anywhere I want. And I can click the Reset PSR button. It'll jump back to its parent. You can freeze the parameters, but I just like it being a visible null. But anyway, what I'm going to do is take its parent and add and we're getting fancy here. Like, you don't have to go this advanced. But under rigging tags, making a constraint tag, I would like this to go to the halfway point between the left and the right. So I would like to do a transform under transform, which is the renamed PSR. I want 2 different settings here, and I want it to always go take the left, take the right, and because there's 2 of them, it's automatically going to put it at the halfway point. But what's cool about this is we've added this control in on the parent, meaning the child is the one that we actually can control. So that will give us a little bit of automatic motion, meaning if we grab this bit of the candy bar and I move it, you can see the midpoint is going to do its best to stay at the halfway point. And then I can, at any given point, pull that down and we can get the gooiness that we want. So let's rig this up onto some sort of mesh. Yeah, I think that would be the next step. So reset the PSRs. There's 1 frame of lag happening because these are the controls, so those should happen before our object. So that should not have a frame of lag anymore. And also keep in mind that we'll need to control these sliders. We could build those in as a control, but let's not worry about that quite yet. If we're going to bind this to some sort of mesh, we need it to have some spacing in the beginning. So let's make it really clean and just stretch this out 200 and design whatever the goo is going to look like. Don't need to get fancy here. I'm probably just a cube, so we'll just make a cube. It's already 200 wide, so I move it over exactly 100, so it should be perfectly at the midpoint. Get the overall shape here. So let's just say that's kind of the shape of the goo, and it needs some subdivisions. So how about I'll save it, everybody. Let me just do this next subdivision step. So a few subdivisions. I don't think that we have to actually go all crazy on the subdivisions. A few is fine. I mean, honestly, the best thing would be exactly the number as we have joint count. So I'll just eyeball that, and there we go. So exactly 1 per joint. So that way every joint is being used. And then maybe 1 width segment. Yeah, just so it's all fairly square. And so that everybody doesn't worry too much, we'll give it a save. Nothing. These are very old and stable parts of cinema, so I'm not terribly worried. But it's a good idea to save. Chocolate. Stretch. Okay. That's the. This is our stretch. So I'll put that underneath the joint because that's what's going to end up controlling it. I don't know if we have to make it editable. I feel like there's a chance we might, but I'm going to select all of the joints and the stretch. And let's see if we can automatically bind it. I bet you we have to make it editable, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to do it the wrong way just to find out the information. Yeah, bind is grayed out because it needs to be editable. Hold down Shift, select every joint and the stretch, character, bind, and that should be it. That's now bound to it, meaning now when we grab this and move it, you see that our chocolate is stretching along those lines. Excellent. So yeah, hopefully we should be able to just bend this down, and based on these, we can bend it to curl nicely and stretch that out to whatever degree we want to. And the stretch can also be put in a subdivision surface so that that can get smoothed out if we want to. And possibly I would take the left and right controls and scoot them into the surface a little bit. So let's just pull that in an extra 5 and pull the right one in an extra 5. That'll still go to the midpoint. And then let's see what else we can do. As you're stretching this, and let's just get a couple keyframes going because that'll be good. Hopefully it doesn't look too squishy. I'm trying to think of if we can make it work, because you actually can where do we get the transform? Where's the volume setting? Maybe the IK splines don't have volume type linear. Oh, here it is. Oh, it's length volume. So if we do the volume scale, then if this works the way I think it will, then as we stretch it, you see it gets skinnier. And then when we squish it, it'll actually get fatter. So maybe we shouldn't have initially bound it so long. Maybe it should have been squished, a little bit more squished in the beginning. I'm not going to worry about that too much. Reset the PSR. And let's do some basic movement. Let's just record the coordinates and the rotation. In S24, they rearranged the rotation and the scale pretty much because rotation is just more common than scale, but you just got to pay attention to it. Also, they didn't do it everywhere, which is a little frustrating. Right here, we still have position, scale, and rotation, but here it's position, rotation, scale. Also, we can't say PSR; it's PRS, depending on the situation. Anyway, that's at the time of 0. Also, the midpoint, let's have that record at the time of 0. And let's just go to full 90 and get our end point. Kind of wish I had built a control onto the candy bar, but you see what I'm trying to do here. Let's see, that's twisting around. We might have to figure something out there. We'll have it pull up a little bit. That's fine. We'll just keyframe it as it is. And then at this time, we'll have the midpoint have stretched down. Yeah, it's spinning on us. We'll have to figure that out. Let's see. We'll have it keep stretching further. That's a hell of a stretch, but let's see what we got. So yeah, that's stretching, but this spin, it's not great. There may be, yeah, there is the twist. So let's do a world. And we might have to rebind it, because it needs the ability to control the twist, and it didn't have a direction. I should have set that twist at the beginning. Not the hardest thing to fix, but what we do need to do is, let's go to a bind. I'm going to go to frame -1, and at frame -1, I'll move this to the original stretched position and keyframe it there. So now I can always go to frame -1 and get back to that bind position, which is potentially handy. Let's set that to the bind pose. So just clicking set bind pose should hopefully fix that. So now if you jump back to frame 1, oh no, it's still flipping out. It does eventually settle down, but that world twist is not, or do I have some handles in there? Yeah, the handles might be causing it in the beginning. Yeah. All right, well, we just have to keep control of everything. Oh, also the squish. You see it's squishing here. Well, this is what we get for doing the fancy method. You see that the volume scaling, because we're pinching it in, it's squashing. Now that is actually, I think there's a setting to control that. It's volume scale. It's based on the object. Yeah, wish I had done that slightly differently. Let me think. I think the best thing to do would be to bind it at a smaller pose. As I was saying, that's something we should have done. So let's do it. We could have done this a lot simpler. And now that we did the fancy way, we're running into a couple of complications, but nothing too bad. We're going to squish this way down. Let's go to 160. So that is now our -1 pose, which means I'll override that. And I want this to be the original bind. So we need to turn off the skin deformer, and I need this entire overall shape to be scaled down. So select all polygons, T for scale, modeling axis, and we'll scoot that all the way to -X. I'm going to scale this all the way down until we're at, I think, a length of 50. Nope. A length of, there we go, a length of 40. That should be the correct length there. So sorry about that. If I click this, it's going to stretch all weird, but then as soon as I click on the set bind pose, it should now be matched in the middle. That is now saying that this is kind of the 0 state, which probably means it'll squish in a little bit, but well, okay, it's still a little more than I wanted it to, but now when we stretch it out, it should actually stretch out. Oh, man, this is proven just... by my methodologies, it's proving a little trickier than I thought it would. So this is at 0. Once again, at -1, these needed to be at 0, or this left and right. Those are not at 0 right now, so I need to 0 those out. Now, that is the correct bind pose. All right. Apologies again. Set bind pose. Now it actually goes to the ends. Now when we go here, that will pull them into the surface a little bit, and now it should actually stretch that out. So now that that's all finally working, we can start putting the depth back in again. So at the time of 0, that's the depth, and then at the very end, we want there to be a bunch of curl on that, and a bunch of curl on that, bunch of curl on that, and that can just be a smooth transition between the two. Stretch. But the stretch doesn't have to happen right away. We can go to like this midpoint, and the mid could be up a bit, maybe bent down a little, and keyframe that in its position. And in addition to that, we could, let's have that bend a little bit, yeah, a little bit of extra depth at that time. So that should give us a more of a midpoint, and then that can start drooping down more. The point being is we have complete control over that. So as these move, we do whatever we want with those moving around. A couple things in addition. First of all, if we don't want it stretching that way, we can just go back here and say length is not based on the volume scale. So let's just say none. And now it's going to maintain that same length and just get stretched. Did that change my bind pose? It's getting away from the edge a little bit, but I thought that when we bound, that should have been correct. Turn off the subdivision. Yeah, that goes all the way. That's going right to the edge. I guess it's slightly, it's beyond. Oh, that one's slightly before, that one's slightly beyond. I wonder why. That's zeroed out. That's zeroed out. That's zeroed out. That's zeroed out. So why is this not -100 for the position? Oh, I guess it was just slightly moved. I'm not sure when I did that. Man, it's getting toasty in here. I'm gonna turn a fan on. Let's see. Okay, anyway, let's reset that. Let's set the bind pose again. Hopefully that little bit will help with our stretching. It's still escaping that edge a little bit. I'm kind of not sure why. We could ignore it, but I wouldn't mind fixing it. Because it's so straightforward here. Oh, stuff doesn't bind to the tip. That's a thing. Yeah, okay. If we put one more joint here, this is actually the end. But I'm going to take one more and scoot it over a little bit of space. Doesn't even matter how much, because then that will also get bound to it. And this can just get deleted. That can get deleted, and select all the joints, select the stretch, character, bind. Because this one will now although that one will just stay there. Does that actually work? No, because it's not part of the chain. Tricky. Surprisingly tricky for a relatively simple setup. There's a couple other things I want to get into, and I'd like to fix some of these inconsistencies that we're getting, but... And I mean, this is not, none of these are Cinema's fault. I'm just not thinking through the rig the entire way. Stretch. I don't know. I kind of feel like we should move on. I keep trying to fix it, but we keep running into other issues. One other thing I want to throw in there is we can put a taper. Yeah, if we take this bulge, actually, I'm going to take this bulge deformer and put it as the first child. So if we turn off the stretch, this is just what the shape is. So if we take the bulge and say, hey, fit the parent, actually first rotate it, and then fit it to parent. As long as that's calculating before the skin, we can stretch this out, and instead of letting the stretchiness happen from the joints, we could just do it from here. And now, oh, did I? Oh, I forgot they changed the way this works. So this now has to be set to X plus, and then I fit the parent, and now it's the correct orientation. So, but you see now, if I pinch this in, do you see how it's getting skinny in the middle, but it's still adapting to the shape of our overall stretch? So that's a pretty cool thing, that as long as the deformer calculates beforehand, that should work correctly, that bit of it. We could have made additional controls there. That probably would have been the way to do it. But anyway, stretch, and that can sink down as far as we want. At a certain point, if we were going further in the keyframe, you could start pulling this down even further and even pinch in this one, because it started getting sharper as it dripped down. Now, the original questioner was saying that they're hoping for a way to break it in the middle and have them drip down. It's important to mention those things in the beginning if that was something you're interested in, because I'd build a completely different rig. There's no way to break this joint chain and have it do that. You'd have to have a completely different rig to do that. I'll give that a save. Let's see, if we did want it to break in the middle, it's super goofy. If everybody's down, I wouldn't mind continuing this. Now, why don't we try... Does that make sense? How do we stretch it? Because those cinema rigs don't stretch. Well, what I would probably do... What we should probably do if we wanted it to break, if you're building this mechanically and you want to actually break, I mean, other ways to do this would be like some sort of crazy fluid sim. Obviously, that kind of thing can get really crazy. But what you'd actually probably want to do in this circumstance would be two different joint chains that meet. So let's try this again. And can we... if you're keyframing it, stretching. I had been thinking it'd be cool to do it with dynamics. We could actually have one of the connectors break in the middle, but those don't stretch. You can't stretch those. So I don't think that would be a good method. We could do two different joint chains that are both targeting the same center point. I was going to say we could try cloth and bind it to the individual objects, but that's not going to stretch very well, and it's going to break very unpredictably. Although, it could be neat. How do we... I can never... Let me think of how those bind. Let's try a completely different rig. So, copy, new, paste. So we're just keeping these controls in. In fact, how about those become our controls now? And yeah, let's kill off the keyframes. If I select the position and rotation, hold down Control and Shift as I click, it'll erase out the entire track. So these should all be zeroed out quite nicely. If we create a... See, the problem with the cloth is no matter what we do, eventually we want it to be crushed in here. So when we crush it in here, if we did stretch it with cloth, what's it going to do while it's inside? Like that doesn't make sense. Now we could empty out a cavity inside of it. Maybe that would work. So the stretch is only a fraction of what's happening. I don't know how stretchy we could actually get it, but possibly. I suppose let's give that a go. So the simplest way is I'm just going to delete these polygons. So you can see there's a big empty thing inside of it. Creating a new plane. T for scale. Get it the right length. Get it the correct width. Turn on SSAO so we can see a little bit of... Oh, I didn't move these. These are not centered. Should we do that for the stretching at 0? Why not? Why not? At the time of 0, these will both be at 0. So keyframe those. And now at -1, this is where we actually bind the rig and whatnot. Let's move that over 20 and this one over 20. I don't even know if we have to do that now that I think about it. Let's just do it closed. So we'll put that inside. Let's make let's put on some colors on this at least. It's not going to look like much like chocolate with us being on a perfect square, but we'll get something slightly caramel-esque color for that plane. Okay, so we need polygons inside of it. I'd like them to be pretty even. So, and we don't want too many, but we're going to need enough so that when they tear, we don't see a pop. So I'm going to go higher than I might normally. Okay. Now, if this is the goo, make that editable. We would like to bind these points and these points. Soft body is going to give us the tearing that we're talking about. So that needs a, not soft body, cloth. So cloth forces, dresser fix points. Now, this feels like we want a belt. I never did much with a belt. Do we even fix the points for a belt? We might. Simulation, cloth belt. belt on. Those are the points. Belt on. Is that an object that it wants? Set. I mean, maybe. And now duplicate that and then put it on the right. And select those points. Clear, set. Does that work? I don't know. Let's not even look at that. Let's just see if these aren't moving. So yeah, that does fall. It's nice and stretchy and goopy. Now we got to keyframe these. So we'll take the right half. It's keyframed at the time of 0, so at the time of 90, I'll have stretched it over here. Keyframe, let's just see what happens. Let's see if that belting worked. Definitely not. Now, let's clear out the fixed points. Clear. Maybe those are not supposed to be fixed. Oh yeah, look, that's totally moving with it. So that belting did work. Now, let's see if we can make the cloth. In the cloth, can we make, under expert, oh, we need to make things colliders. So I'm going to right click on both the chocolate bars. Simulation, cloth collider. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, it might not see these polygons very well. And we're going to have to chill those out. So I don't want those to be colliders anymore. But what I would like to do is invisible colliders. What's the easiest way to do this? I will just duplicate, select the top polygons, grow, delete. Oh, grow, delete. Yeah, okay, now they're on the bottom. And now D for extrude, but I'm going to create caps. So now I can extrude those downward. So now those are both solid blocks. Those will be what get collided with. And let's make sure I'm going to align the polygons. That's just fine. These are now colliders. So we delete the material from that. Adding in the simulation cloth collider. Those are simple boxes. Hopefully it can see those. Yeah, now you see they're just seeing them. It's a little twitchy, but let's just work on, we'll go one step at a time. Hide those colliders. They're still there. It does seem to have some sort of refresh issue. When we hit play, we might hit backward twice. But now you can see we're getting a nice bit of stretch. We just have to worry about that reset on frame 1. Let's jump that up to 0. Maybe my -1 frame, it doesn't like that because that -1 only got added in Cinema recently. Yeah, it doesn't like the -1 frame, but the -1 frame only became possible recently in Cinema. Prior to that, and cloth is older than that was added in. Okay, so let's see if we can calm this down. First of all, these should have, let's just say no friction, no bounce. The cloth itself has a bunch of settings. Gravity, we definitely want the drag. We want the gravity. Let's give it a decent amount of drag. Yeah, that calms it down overall. And then the tag is the main one. And this is the stiffness. So let's go easy on the stiffness. Maybe not the stiffness. Lots of settings here to play with. And we don't usually use cloth, so. It's interesting, with no friction, I would think that this would just be freely sliding, but clearly the side that's moving is like getting the lion's share of the pull. Now, a lot of things to consider. Oh, there is a size. We can animate the size, which can be really useful. So we can increase the size or shrink it. If we shrink that to 55, it might flip out a bit, but you can see how it's going to like really pinch it in. So keyframing that might be a good way of getting the stretch look. So let's keyframe that, and then as it plays, it's getting, pulled out. But let's say that at this point it's gone down to 75%. Let it play again, and now it's constantly shrinking as we stretch, so hopefully that can give us that stretchiness. Next up, I mean, it's got friction, but it's colliding with things that don't have friction. You never know, though. This is an older system. Yeah, it seems to stretch it maybe a little bit more. I can't tell. Now, flexion and rubber are our main two settings. I know the rubber is one. Rubber gives you stretchiness. You see how much those can stretch now? And then our amount of drag, which calmed it down a lot, but it's really like taking a lot of the energy out. Oh, okay, the drag was also stopping from stretching. So the easiest thing to do here would be to just increase the gravity, which is going to force it to go down. That's something we could keyframe as well to keep stretching. But let's see if we can get this thing to tear. So the main thing with tear is just use tear, and it's at 120% stretch. So it looks like it broke right away at that base point. So we got to be careful about this. I'm going to say 200% stretch. And now it's still probably going to break in that back part. We might, I'm going to bind it a little bit more. Lines. Okay, so we're seeing through it. This belt is binding the right one. I think that's the right one. It doesn't tell us, it's just showing both. But this was the right one, so I'm going to grow 2 times. So those are all going to get bound. So let's set that as the right binding and grab the other one. Select just the row, grow, and set that as the binding. And now when we hit play, well, it still breaks at the first opportunity for it to break. But the next step is to create a vertex map. So I'll select, what's the middlemost? This one's the middlemost. I'll grow that by 1. And let's set the vertex weight here. So selection, set vertex weight. Set that to 0. Invert. And set vertex weight to 100. Now it's not displaying it very well there. But if we go back to our regular display mode. And select our vertex map. Yeah, now you can see how that's applied. Under our tag, I should be able to put this tear, or it might be like there might be different spots, but let's try putting the vertex map there and see what happens. Yeah, okay, so that's the tearing point now. Now, it's going to look weird in the beginning. It's like, that doesn't look like a tear. Well, that's true, because you don't see tears in cloth until you put it into a cloth surface. So under, did they move that? Actually, I think it does live under here now. Yeah, but let's put that into a cloth surface. Don't subdivide. But now, yeah, now you see it actually pops and disappears. So that is where it is breaking. Now, I don't know. I did 2 layers of this because in regular soft body dynamics, you have to do 2 layers to make it break properly in the spot, but I don't know if that's the case here. So I'm going to set the vertex weight here also to 100. So only there's a red stripe down the center. I want to see if that still breaks. Yeah, it does still break, so we can simplify that a bit. Now, that's breaking right away because that is set to 0. I wonder what I'd love to do would be make this one like a little bit more dynamic so we can control it with fields. All this manual like tweaking of this, like I'd love this to be procedural. So let's see if we can do that. In this case, creating a spherical field. Turn off the cloth node so we can actually see it. If I create a spherical field, that's dead center. I need it to stay right in the center of that cloth. So let's see if I can do a rigging constraint. I would like to constrain clamp to the goo, not to the origin, but to, let's just say a point. There's a point right there in the dead center. 0 distance. And actually now if you see if I try and move it, it's going to be jumping around, but snapping to each point. So if I lock the position, the hope is that that would, yeah, you see how this is moving along with it? So that's what we want. So now that we've got that, I can now manipulate. I'm going to have to lock. How do we do this? Oh, seemingly I can have them both selected. So I can shrink this in to make that the weak point. Did get scooted. I've locked it in now. That's fine. That's the weak point. And we need to invert. So remapping, invert. So that should be the weak point. But we don't actually want to go that weak. So inside of, we could change it here. We could increase the minimum. So you see it's weaker, but not 0. We can actually pull that up quite a bit, and now that becomes the weakest point. I don't know if that will actually break there. Oh, that still seems to. So yeah, that seems to have broken in the correct spot. Oh, it also broke back there. Yeah, that's still tearing back there. That's if it stretches to 200. Yeah, this is what happens when we use the old cloth system. It's just a little clunkier. I'm gonna iterate a few extra times. That's it's a bit of a brute force. Yeah, that just worked automatically. It's a bit of a brute force tool, but it can work. Okay, so the spherical field is fine, or the concept is fine, but let's change it to a box. We're gonna shrink that in. We're gonna stretch it. Pinch that way in. Where's our XYZ? X. Pinch that way in. We can make it extra tall. That's fine. So let's see what the vertex map looks like. Yeah, so that's now weaker. The box doesn't need to... Well, we can even do something like that where that's the weaker point. And, you know, I just want it to be... Why does that stretch out when we do that? I don't know why that stretches out when I do that. Maybe, yeah, I'm not sure. Let me, the alternative method that I had been going to do anyway was just to take this box field and add a solid on top of it. And now as I pull this back, you see that's going to affect the power, which is now behaving the way I thought it would. But let's just call that good. So hitting play, that is now the point that can break. If we want to, and I think we do, we can add in a bit of variation on that. So well, this could get wider. And inside the vertex map, see, this is why I want to build it parametrically, because now we get this nice fall off here. That can be overlaid by a random noise. And the noise, go to the field. Here's the settings for it. You can already see like a bit of a pattern. We could stretch this out X, Y, Z. So let's grab X and stretch it. So now you can see a little bit of a pattern there. This is very dependent on our point count. We can't change the point count at this point. But now you see how that has varied a little bit. Changing this to contour, changing the contour to curve, we could pinch these in a little bit more. And you see we get a more distinct overlay, something like that. Nice. And now I do want to still, under field, grab the solid. And let's set that to multiply. Ooh, no, don't multiply. Yeah, max is fine. And we can set this to normal, and now I can still like weaken it. So let's make that relatively weak. So now that's the only really weak point there. So hitting play, let's see what we get. Yep, that broke, and it seems to have broken a little bit more randomly. A little bit, not very. You see, we just get those little chunks. Like I said, I created those extra. Oh, this is gonna be tricky. Let's really stretch the tear. I don't want it to tear unless it really has to. Oh, that almost was doing something nice. 400. There was one little bit of tear. Ooh, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Snap, 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 snap. Now, polygons do disappear when this happens. Like, it's just something that will happen. Now, that's... we're shrinking the size. Man, there's a lot of variables here. We're shrinking the size in order to pinch it, which is great, but that means when it snaps, they're going to be retracting inside of the chocolate bar. You see it's suddenly going like and getting sucked into the inside. The stretch is pretty nice, but they will suddenly get sucked back in, and that is just their overall length. I mean, it's almost like we need to increase the size, or they are bound. We could make the binding push out. I don't know. I do want to move on to another question soon, but now that we've got this, yeah, I'm not going to worry about the stretching at this point. You see the concepts, but what I would like to do is get a little bit of a volume out of this thing if it works. I don't know if it will. So give this a save as the second file, and it's important to note that you get access to the scene files if you're supporting on Patreon. But anyway, I can stretch this out, and let's see if we can take this entire thing and feed it into a volume builder. Volume mesher. Nothing's going to show up right away because this is infinitely thin. But if I add in a dilate and erode, that should inflate it a little bit. Increase our point count a little bit and be, yeah, it's good. I mean, I am inflating it, so it's just going to stick out these edges. We'd have to shrink down the overall shape if we want to fix that, but let's just not worry about that yet. So now that'll stretch, go snap, and they're getting sucked inside of it. But the smaller we make our voxel size, the tighter, those will be. And now, a lot of this is just having fun and blurp, changing the settings here and seeing what we can end up with. Like more gravity. Let's just turn off this stretch. That could have a significant effect on when it tears, but let's just kill off the stretching. And stretch. It drips down a little bit now because it's not getting sucked back in. But and then, I don't know if this is a good idea, but what if we increase it? So I'm going to keyframe that to... let's go up to 150. Now, unfortunately, it's going to get wider as well as longer, but let's just see what happens. Stretch, and then we get those, and now they are somewhat drooping down. Blur. Could be worse. It's a little. Let's see. We just have to look at this. I wonder where that I thought the vibration might have been coming from the actual tearing. Let's 350, have those hold on for longer. And then there's a lot of drag. A little drag might be important, but let's go easier on that so those droop down quicker. Snap. Yeah, poly counts are super important. One of the super unfortunate things when it comes to cloth is we did all this work with the belting, we did all the work with the cloth settings, but we're not allowed to change the original geometry. If I change the original geometry, we have to like rebuild those tags again. So you have to really have those planned out. And I thought by giving ourselves those extra facets, moving them forward, that would have kind of helped. That's getting the cloth. Before it goes in the volume, I will subdivide it once. That'll help smooth that a bit. So then we get the blob. That'll be a little smoother. Let's stretch those boxes a hair. Blurp. Whoop. I don't know. There's a lot to play with there. I feel like there should be easier ways of doing that. Just kind of the overall thing conceptually. I have to think about some more. It's a good question. It's a good question because there's a lot of approaches depending on what the goal ultimately is. Even here, I mean, there's so many things we could keyframe. Like, we know it's going to break, but let's say that until it gets to frame 65, that'll finally go down to 350. But let's say up until 55 that this is holding at like 777. So now it really doesn't want to break. So that might force this to stretch extra far before finally it's kind of like, oh yeah, you're allowed to tear. And you see how that was a nicer stretch. It took longer to get there. So if we keep pulling these out further, then that's going to be stretching, 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 stretching. Finally breaks and we get them falling down. I wonder, no, these aren't deformers. That wouldn't work as well. I was going to say, what if we put a taper in after the fact? I mean, there are ways we could taper it, but also let's try putting a smoothing. This might be a good use for a smoothing. Yeah, that'll smooth out the entire surface. You can't, there's possibly still going to be some pinches, but that'll smooth out a bit. Yeah, scaling up the overall thing. And that's so that we get to actually ooze down. But the stretching of that is not the greatest. I would have liked to shrink it, but then it sucks back inside of it. Yeah, a lot of interesting questions on that. But a fine question. It's one I'll think about more, so maybe we can tackle again in the future. Dean was asking about the volume twitchiness, which you're seeing. Yeah, you're definitely seeing here. You saw me do a couple steps to try and smooth it out. One thing, I put the original mesh into a subdivision surface. The next thing I did was I kept on decreasing our voxel size, and then I put this smoothing on. Those all did things to help with our volume, but ultimately, the main thing, if this looks twitchy, your final geometry will look twitchy. And you got to pay attention to if what we're feeding in has any twitchiness. You see there is kind of a bump, bump, bump there, bump, 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 bump. So like that will translate into it. So it's not like that's the volume's fault. The cloth here, would, there's just not a lot we can do. It's not soft bodies. Soft bodies like are very specific mechanically speaking, where these are so weird. Like if you want to increase the overall power, you have to do more iterations, which changes every variable. So it's very, very strange. Chop is asking if it would be possible to put a jiggle deformer on there. I don't know if it's in regards to smoothing it out, but I had been wondering, and I don't know. I don't think the point count changes, so possibly a jiggle deformer is a way of smoothing that out. So if this is getting that, I just don't know if the jiggle deformer calculates after the cloth does. So, I mean, that should just all work. The point count doesn't change, right? Let's see, how can we... Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, so clearly you put the jiggle on there and that can affect the cloth after the fact. I intentionally put some crazy settings on there, but if we... It does seem to behave a little oddly, but that might possibly add some smoothness to it. If that's calculating after the fact, and then put the subdivision surface on after it, the volume builder, smoothing actual geometry. That seems to have done a lot. Like, I'm not seeing much in the way of jitter there. Now, yeah, at the end of the day, just the volume, the resolution of the volume is what's going to determine how it looks. And of course, when we're using volumes, you can't have an object, you can't texture it with like a brick texture because it needs to be something like liquid or glass or something that doesn't have individual variations. It has to be the overall shape. That's what I got for now. I'm going to jump to Twitch. So I'm jumping back and forth between Twitch and YouTube questions. Marcel posted earlier my take on this. What do we got? It's a Vimeo link. Whoa, it looks crazy already. Oh boy. I'm worried. This is by Gins. Who's Gins? It's Daniel Ginsberg. That's what we got. It is in Houdini. And if it's anything like what I think it's going to be, yeah. Well, first of all, that looks like a liquid sim. It looks like the basis of this is a liquid sim, and then something's happening on the surface after the fact. And that, like, it's a liquid, so how would you... How would you get these things on the outside? I don't know for sure. I mean, a liquid sim is not something we can do in a trivial way, for sure. I'm trying to think of, is there... If the... I'm wondering if these could potentially just be two bits of geometry, because the way it looks on the edges, that looks like two different meshes intersecting each other, and that's the part I'm going to zero in on. So let me see if I can... Let's at least chat that concept. The basis is a liquid sim. I'm just going to ignore that part. So making a sphere, bunch of subdivisions. Let's even double that. If we deform this, we could use a displaced deformer, but I always, these days, use a MoGraph plane, deform the points, and I would like these to push out not on Y, but on Z. Be relatively subtle with that. Under the fall off, feed in some random noise, make it large enough that we can see the pattern. Let's choose a different noise this time. Voronoi 2. Not terribly distinct. Let's double our point count again. Oh yeah, I don't like that pattern. Doing nothing for me. Yeah, something like this is more along the lines. So, my thought is, if we deform something like this, you know what? I feel like we even need more subdivisions. We're trying to do it in the viewport, so we just need tons and tons of subdivisions. If I were to make a duplicate of this, and let's apply a different material. Let's say that the second one is not deforming quite well. Do I want to say not quite as far? If I just push it in like 1 or 2, you see is now we don't see it at all. Like it's completely interior to the previous one. And then if we deform it a second time, then the entire thing's going to bulge out all super crazy. But if we limit where those are happening via remapping the noise that's coming into it. So let's literally do that by using a curve. So yeah, if I start doing something like this, it's the same effect twice, but only like on the tips is the idea. Now, that is the idea. I think we need to convert this rig slightly. Instead, I think we have enough subdivisions to show it. Creating a vertex map. Yeah, we need a vertex map so that everything's on the surface. So the vertex map will use fields, not freeze, and it's going to take in that random field. So now that this is taking in, you know, all the pattern, then this plane is not being fed the random field anymore. It will be fed the vertex map. Now, visually, this should be identical. It's not going to feel any different. But the point of this is that the yellow parts has now moved out. Meanwhile, that noise would have been sampling globally. So when a second copy is put in, the exact same idea is happening. I don't even think we need that one anymore. This one is still referencing that. This will not push out quite as far. Same idea. Change the color again. And then, again, we're going to bulge it out. But this time, with the fall off and we put the remapping, well, it's just going to be identical. No, it's definitely more controlled. So now you can see that the second one is doing a secondary kind of explosion, but those are only kind of on the peaks. And if we calm that way down, right now it's on 18, but if we put that to like 4, then now we can start getting them just peeking out on those places where they kind of overlap. This is the concept. I feel like something like this is happening. Now, can we feed in... Can we do a difference map? That would be really cool. I really love doing this in Photoshop. Let's see if the concept will translate here. Hiding the original. We've got a secondary vertex map. Actually, this one probably was referencing that vertex map, wasn't it? But that's all fine. What I want to do is have this vertex map not reference the random field. I would like it to reference this vertex map. And currently set to nearest. I'm going to say I want it to be based on... It says nearest. That did deform, but this one is not deformed yet. So you see the pattern is very different. It's pre-deformed. Actually, that's probably fine. We just need this all to happen after the fact. Okay, I still want to see if this concept works. So here's what I want to do. This vertex map is referencing the first one. But if we bring, currently it's set to nearest, which is just fine. I'm going to bring it in a second time. And this one, I want it to be based off the average. Also, we probably need to name these differently. Map 2. If they're named the same, there's some bit of the data that gets confused and they override each other. I feel like something doesn't like something here. Yeah, that... Oh, I guess there are a lot of them. Okay, that's quicker. It was so big, it was averaging out like thousands of points with each other. Okay, now here's what I want to show you. So you see, here is a blurry version of the vertex map, and here is a not blurry version of it. You see we got really high resolution because of how many polygons we have. So this is something I do in Photoshop. Actually, it's kind of like it's a high pass in Photoshop, and the basic idea of it is we take one image, like a black and white image, but in this case it's a vertex map, and invert it. And now it's the opposite. But one is a blurred version of the other, meaning if I take this and then overlay it, or not even overlay, let's do a 50% overlay, we start getting like a high pass, which is like a 50%. What this is now doing is it's revealing differences between the two maps. What are the differences between the two maps? Well, one was blurry. So depending on how much we blur, this is now no longer a height field for the highest point. It's a height field for the differences, which could make smaller points pop out. And we can dramatically change kind of the detail level of this by changing this averaging. So we'll get more, the smaller the averaging is, and I don't know how small we can go, but the smaller it is, the sharper the details should be. We're going to get tinier ones. Let's see if it's going to be visually represented. I mean, we might already be smaller than it. Yeah, it's already smaller than it, so we can only go the other direction. But if I start increasing it, you're going to see that what's going to happen is we start getting the larger details getting revealed. So you see we get these larger overall lines where if we make it smaller, we just get the smaller lines. Anyway, that's the idea. So then the idea is this, I wonder if this one can deform not based on map 2, but on map 1. Oh, okay, cool, we can. So that's deforming on map 1, and it's only going slightly out. Let's bring it visually back again. So we're back to them being identical. I don't know if this will work, but now the second one, we can have it look at map 2. We might want the curve, but yeah, this one's now looking at map 2, and that should be the differences between all the different points. So now, interesting. I was going to say it should be kind of applying everywhere to its different varying degrees within that small range. What do we got here? That one only should be seeing the vertex map. And it should be pushing out 19. And then this one is a secondary layer. It's interesting. It's only in the lower areas. Maybe we might not be getting enough resolution from the blurred version. Yeah. It's not quite enough resolution. The concept is there, but it's not fully coming through. It's too bad. And now we're dealing with like a lot of polygons. Yeah. I guess it's the point of highest contrast. In Photoshop, yeah, we could probably make images in Photoshop that would actually do this. Oh, but my Photoshop's not even opening, so I can't show you. Paul, no, I've done this many times in Photoshop. I'm fairly confident in my methodology. The only thing that I didn't do that could have improved it is increase the contrast. So let's go back to viewing this map, and right now you'll see that it's very subtle. Like these differences are very, very, very subtle. We can pop them out a little bit more, I think, if I lower that averaging amount. Yes, no? The only thing that we can do is we're right in that 50% mark. This is like 45 to 55. So then if we bring in the curve, or essentially some sort of contrast, then I can start pulling this over and remapping those to higher values. So then you'll see a fuller range of exactly what's happening. And now it's a really crazy looking map, which is pretty neat actually. Like, that feels very different from a regular cinema material. But this is now a representation of the differences between the layers. I just don't think we have the resolution to properly make that fully propagate to the entire thing. Yeah, the concept is there. But once again, it's about the height differences, not the height. Interesting, though. Checking the chat. Ralph, thank you. Saying that he loves Recall. Appreciate it. Yeah, Chop, that's not a bad idea. Like, Chop is saying to just, like, increase the cycling of the noise. And yes, we could map the noise more times and then possibly layer it up on the other one again. I don't know. We're just... That would be a different effect. It's one sort of derived from the other. I'd probably want to overlay it on top of itself. But we're just nowhere near what this is doing. And I don't know. I just feel like there's something going on here that is just not something I'm familiar with. Possibly, what do you call it? What's that one? I'm blanking on the term. There's that one effect where you make things look cellular, and you can do it with vertex maps if you do the kind of correct formula. It's kind of like this recursive, like you feed it into itself. I wonder if it's doing that type of thing. But yeah, like I say, I'm properly stumped on this one. And the thing that's making it most impressive is we were going to do the most generic version of it, which was the most generic possible version, which was just going to be static. This is on a liquid sim, which would mean there's not any consistency between them. I wonder if there's some sort of like the volume has direction, and that direction of the volume could then be exaggerated. Like, I could see that become a good variable. Yeah, reaction diffusion. Thanks, Chop. Reaction diffusion. And Dean, both of you guys were on it. Yeah, Zach, I don't... You're saying that you feel like it might have been a curvature map on a bumpy surface, but how would you generate the bumpy surface? Because it's a liquid sim. So you can't get any coherence from that. So a lot of this is like, how is there these consistent like streaks traveling around it? Like, how are we getting this spiral here? And my thought would be some sort of, I don't know, maybe it could even be a, how do I want to say it? Here, a weird effect just popped in my head. This isn't at all the question, but just for fun, the change this to an icosahedron again, or icosahedron, and very similar. Or we're going to do a couple things that are similar. So by another plane, deform the points by z. Okay, that'll inflate a little bit. Now I would like another sphere, and this one's gonna be very, very low poly. Yeah, pretty much that. So if I add a vibrate tag onto that, and I would like it to rotate 720, copy, 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 0.1, still probably too quick, but let's see, hit play. Yeah, it's a little quick, 0.02. So that's going to be rotating around. So then that receives a tracer. The tracer is going to trace the vertices. So now you can see we're going to get a little line drawn behind each one. So if you imagine these as individual particles on an entire fluid sim, and we even limit the space here from start. Nope, from end, of course. From end, so now we get these twirling around. Seems like we can go a bit faster. So now we can get these moving around. Inside of this sphere, this can be seeing the fall off of the tracer. And you can start, well, first of all, you get some weird, crazy patterns right out of the gate, but that's because by default it's set to curve, which is always cool, but like mathematically, like the things that are going on are very, very unpredictable. The sensical one is a radius. So setting this to radius, now we can get these individual lines all traveling along the surface, creating these nice little bumps. And depending on how long we allow these to live or how many points that there are, we could start like getting some pretty cool patterns getting revealed. So the point being is like that information is coming in somehow, and based on this, you can imagine actually, you know, trivial to create a second sphere now. It'll be a little bit bigger than that one. So now we can, you know, now you see we get these nice little secondary lines popping out from the first one. Those could be different materials. And you just get kind of cool shapes traveling around. So I feel like there's that bit of information inside of the other one. Like somehow you're getting lines drawn by tracing something, and that's tracing certain key particles that are in the fluid sim, something like that. And then once you get this bump coming out, I mean, this is practically the end result. Well, if everything was moving around all crazy splashy, then that type of thing could be something. But I don't know. I don't know. More points. I wonder how many. Well, let's see. Let's make more. And then make them live for less long. We're not answering the question at all anymore. We're just playing around. Huh. I must have been increasing the wrong one. There's more lines. More. And let's have them spin a wee bit faster. But not live for very long. No, if once they're of a certain length, they kind of lose their overall look. 222, radius of 5, 2 maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, obviously just a weird little thing that popped in my head to tinker. I'll save it in case somebody can think of something cool to do with it. Spin, trace, displace. Oh, caps lock was on. It'll stay. Let's see. Oh yeah, Chop's always on the same page. He's saying he was wondering if there's some sort of spline flow going. Anyway, Mick is seconding Oliver's question. Let's see what Oliver had. Mute. Ah, Jeremy. What is this, a commercial? What are we in? Is that Firefox? Yeah, it's Firefox. Hang on, I gotta. Oh. Well, this is Jeremy. This is Jeremy, who's awesome. He works out in New York, and it looks like he might have made a for real, like, dynamic trebuchet. Now, this is during a presentation of his from a couple of years ago. So does he not? I think maybe he doesn't like talk about like how he actually made it. Yeah, so I think he just does it, but probably doesn't explain it. I'm just taking a look overall. I wonder where he's speaking at. What's funny is during the bonus streams, the Rocket Lasso bonus streams I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, most Tuesdays and Thursdays. Lately, I've been really heads down on trying to get a plugin launched. But we spent there was a tutorial idea that we had that we were trying to make a completely resetting catapult setup, and it just wasn't. It never quite worked well enough to try and make a tutorial out of it. Let me see if I can track it down. That's going to be hard to track down. That's going to be last season. So, where are we looking? Live shows. Oh, that might have been off the record. Yeah, off the record, season 2. I wasn't naming them in those. I wasn't naming the projects on those earlier ones. This, it's going to be almost impossible. I'll check a handful of folders. It was involving the chains. Oh, chain gizmo. I might have found some of it. Let's see what we got. This could be any version, but we spent a lot of time in the bonus streams. And this is when I was making the dynamic breaking chain tutorial. This could be a completely not working one as in an earlier version of Cinema. But there's only one thing happening here. I don't know if it's going to work at all, but there's only one thing happening. And that is this thing is constantly... Something is constantly rotating. I even forget what. But I think there's no keyframes here. So this chain is actually getting pulled, and that's actually pushing this lever, which actually made that roll down. And then, yeah, now it notched itself in, and then it releases it, and then it fires it and goes around. I can't believe that actually worked in the scene file I found. And it should be, I mean, the idea is it should be a perfect loop. And actually, yeah, this entire thing is, it's even constant. Something, what is the rotating around? Maybe there's a latch, but you see this is all mechanically actually really happening, where this gear is not allowed to, you see this is like a ratcheting gear. So it can turn one way, but then once it goes all the way here, that's going to boop, and now it's not allowed to fire because it's ratcheted. And then once this pushes it out, then suddenly it releases it. That's actually what's happening. It's not faked. It's like fully the dynamics doing it. One escaped there. And then coming up with all the mechanisms here so that this gets pulled down, boops that, hits this ball up, which then can fall, and then sit and wait its turn to fall in. But anyway, this is like 6, 7, 8 hours of work to get to this point, trying to get the dynamics to do what we wanted it to. It's crazy that this chain is actually what's doing it, like, and how quickly this is running overall, because it is actually, that chain is actually what's doing the pulling. Now, having said all that, I feel like Trebuchet is relatively simple, but there's a lot of really specific mechanics when it comes to a Trebuchet, where it's like the ratios and the weight, and I just don't know the mechanics of it. We'd have to be spending a bunch of time doing research just on the basics of how a Trebuchet works, which is not, I don't think it's a great use of our time. Oh, it broke. One more time. But anyway, it's a great question. That's really something that more be tackled in the bonus stream than the main one, because it's gonna be like 45 minutes of research, and then slowly building out the mechanics of it. I mean, the basics of it are relatively straightforward. I mean, just to throw it out there, I mean, here we can do, this is not going to be a proper trebuchet, but let's make something. So, trying to make the most basic thing possible. Here is a bucket to hold our object. Here is an arm. then it will pivot from whatever spot, and then we need a big old heavy weight over here. And that'll be pretty heavy, making it big. I mean, honestly, I feel like mechanically speaking, that's all we need. So you put your sphere. This becomes one model. So I'm going to make the arm, right click, simulation, rigid body. I want this to be a compound collision shape. So it should, merge those into one object. And it won't be as stable, but I'll call it a moving mesh. So that'll just fall away. The sphere, that's just fully rigid body. Also this box, just fully rigid body. So what do we need? We need this to kind of pivot. So simulate, dynamics, connector. That connector is already correct rotation. Scoot it up a little bit. T for scale, just so we can see it. So that's pretty much what that's doing. If we want to fire really far, we probably want that pivoting further over this side. That can connect potentially to nothing. So if I connect this cube to that and to nothing, let's see if that will swing from there. Yep, that's swinging from there. And now we need to connect this weight to that one. Several options for that. Let's just put a spring. Why not? Spring. I would like to spring from the weight. Reset position and connect to the box. I have to offset it, so x minus x. Hopefully it's connecting to there. Now it's just connected in the middle of the box, but I'm just going to allow it to pull. And yeah, I mean, there you go. That's like the most basic version of it. We got something heavy. It is being forced to pivot from this spot, and the spring will yank that down, and the entire thing flings forward. And mechanically speaking, I'm sure there's all sorts of like angles and cantilevers. And if we, even if we put a collider box here, like a thin bar of some sort, so that once it gets to a particular angle, it just stops it dead. So that will just be a mechanical part of the overall machine. Simulation collider body. So now that would like boom, hit that. It couldn't go any further. So, the hope would be it could hit it on the peak of the arc. Let's set this to offset, push that up a bit and over a bit. So that should even kind of swing from that pivot point now. Yeah, so you can very clearly see that spring happen. Boing. So yeah, I mean, this is the idea. Like you can go and start building these things. The basics aren't difficult, but once you start going further, things can get super nuts, and specifics matter. The weight distribution and everything here matters. We could make, if this box was made out of something heavier, then that will dramatically change the dynamics of the overall simulation. You do that by going to mass and changing from world density to a custom density. So now we're saying, hey, that's twice as heavy as it looks by volume. So that will yank that down twice as far, or twice as hard. So maybe that'll fly like twice as far. I'm not sure the way the physics end up working on it. And yeah, it's just kind of cool. I mean, it's really fun to play with this stuff, but specifics matter. Boing. I do love these mechanisms, but research does need to be done. I guess not capital, but I don't know how to spell trebuchet. And then, all right, I guess I'll just Google it. Oh my God, I spelled it right. How is that even possible? I can't spell anything. I was waiting for the autocorrect and it didn't happen. Looks like there's another question. Well, I'm going to check YouTube to see if anything popped up. Banerjee, can I break down Spider-Man sticky dynamic web effect? I do not have... I don't have a specific on that. I mean, the specifics of that question matter. There's very, very different things that might happen. That I would take very different approaches. I mean, even just take the Marvel Spider-Man movies. Like, he's got so many different types of web he shoots that each one could be very different. I mean, it could be as simple as like a cloth dynamics with a web material applied, all the way to different rope simulations. It could get super crazy. But without that specific tutorial, I'm going to check out Pierre's question. What do we got? Instagram, man versus machine, which tend to be intimidating. Oh, look at that. So, man versus machine, they always do amazing things, of course. Full-on shriveling plant. It's pretty cool. Let's see if... I'm not going to worry about the plant thing. I think the effect, the goal here is like a shriveling, shrinking effect. And we can do that in a very simplified model. And I would be curious... if we can just can we make a simple sheet of paper crumple in on itself? Like, make this self-fold up in a very kind of randomized way. That's my proposed goal. Now, it's going to presume... maybe we just add some turbulence, actually. Let's see what happens. We'll start out with no gravity, so it can just float in space. Potentially, we can then put it into a scenario where it would have... some gravity and be colliding with things. But let's work with soft bodies. And we want it to be able to bend quite a bit, so I'm going to give it very little shear, very little flexion. So that's not, it's not trying to keep it straight, but we do want a lot of damping. Sorry, we want a lot of structural. So I had a lot of damping and a lot of structural. Then that's just saying the polygons have to continue to be the size that they currently are. It would be nice to triangulate, but we have to randomly rotate some of them. There might be a setting for that, but let's not worry about that yet. Let's just leave it as polygons for now. Now, the first thought is we just want to introduce some sort of variation. So that can be some turbulence. We'll give it a little bit of scale. It'll be very small. Strength of 25. And if we hit play, we'll probably see something. Yeah, you see just a little bit of bending. No, actually, I will crank that strength up a little bit. Let's just see. It's staying more uniform than I almost think it would. There's no pressure, no stiffness. If I put flexion and shear down to 0, what happens? Yeah, okay. With the flexion and shear down to 0, you see it's a dramatically different effect. So let's keep those, but very mildly. So yeah, I mean, yeah, even one is enough to stop those from like completely collapsing in on themselves. So important variable. So you see that this is just introducing kind of like some waviness and some wind. That's fine. I want to slow down the overall effect from happening. So my go-to on that will just be friction. Good old basic friction should stop this from going too crazy. Actually, it's weaker than... Okay, cranking up to 100 has now slowed it down. So now here is where I thought this would actually potentially get interesting, is simulate forces, field forces, because if we kind of do a feedback loop here, that could be interesting. And my feedback loop is, what's the best way to do this? Because if we put in the plane as an object, I can say I want to view the surface of this thing. So please display a lot of line density and X, Y, Z. What am I missing? Shouldn't we be seeing something? Oh, no, because I put that in the fall off. I always do that. Object. Boop. There we go. Now we see something. Okay. So let's make that a little bit bigger just so we can kind of visualize. So here's the point. These should Doesn't make sense. I don't know. Those should be just pushing away from the surface, but the way these angles are, it seems odd. Oh, it's 7 points still. Surface. There we go. That's what I was expecting. So now they actually are directional. So that should be kind of pushing things around. But is that enough to... That should be pushing away. Let's just see if it does anything. Like, my thought would be that this would... yeah, I don't think it can have an effect on itself because it's going to constantly move and then see where it currently is. But let's crank up the power and maybe something will happen. Okay, so... It seems like... Okay, so it is doing something, but it is... Oh, yeah. Okay. No, it's kind of doing... It's kind of doing what I wanted it to. Which is... It's kind of like a feedback loop. Like it's going to take whatever happens and then exaggerate it. If it bends a little bit, it kind of wants to bend more because it's seeing its own deformation. That's weird. It's not... What? Look, it's not doing anything if I make it not visible, but if I make it visible, it suddenly does something. Why is the visibility affecting the power? That shouldn't be a variable. Anyway, if I just turn... Oh, interesting. It's also not doing it if the display box isn't there. What? Interesting. What I had been thinking might be a variable would be that we need two. We need it to... It can't actually reference itself, which it almost seems to be doing here. But there seems to be some sort of trick. The reason the visibility was doing it is because visibility was making so that the display box wasn't calculating. If the display box isn't calculating, then it's not calculating. It's possible that this is not a bug and that none of those points are actually falling near one of those. But when we forced the display box and it kind of created like kind of a point in space for it to reference. I don't know if it fully makes sense, but that's a theory I'm going on. Anyway, if I were to make a... Let's turn off that field force, and there's a plane instance of that. Oh, I can't hide that, but if I put that into a null, I can hide the null. So if I play... Oh, this instance is not seeing the deformation of that. What if I put into a connect? Unlikely, but possible. Dang. Connect didn't help us this time. Sometimes it doesn't. Oh, well, actually, the instance would have to look at the connect. It's seeing the position change, but not the actual geometry. Dang. Let's see. How can I feedback loop it? I don't think this will do anything, but a slightly different question. What if simulate dynamics force? I don't think soft bodies see forces, but let's see if it does. Force, strength 11, strength 111, inner distance 0. Yeah, this doesn't seem to do anything. It's not going to affect the soft body. How can we make... How can we make its current state be a direction that it wants to then push on? That is the question. But we need two of them, and we can't have two of them. And they won't do identical things. And without an instance of it, that doesn't work. I don't know if this will even see it, but here's another crazy thought. Tracer, trace the vertices from end, just 5 long. So now Now you see that we're getting these splines. So those are that's an external object to it now. So, and they will face different directions depending on if the polygon went up or if the polygon went down. So now if the field force doesn't look at the plane, but it looks at an unrelated object, and I want it to this time go along, I think, maybe. Whoa. Okay. We're getting some oscillation. Not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, in a way, it's a good thing. That means something's happening. Let's try inverting the direction. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it's doing something. You see, as soon as it begins doing some movement, it's doubling down on it. So this is, in the most basic form, doing something. Now, if it does drift off in one direction, then everything else ends up getting yanked in that direction. Let's see. Does the length of it matter? I kind of doubt it. Yeah, that's not really going to change it. Could be a little bit quicker to calculate, but let's try making this not move. So I'm going to say follow position 25, 25. So now it's just a wrinkling. And boom, everything gets super duper collapsed in on itself. I mean, that's neat. So yeah, that is the feedback loop I was looking for. So this is what I thought we could get right away. So as soon as that little bit of turbulence comes in, it's kind of looking at its previous frame and deforming based on that. If we go down to just one frame, that should be like always just one frame behind as far as what it's doing. And the turbulence, let me think for a second. Oh, hang on, I gotta do something. Click there. Click here. Okay, cool. Just need to make sure that's gonna be in the right window. And more back. Okay, let me think. So those are all collapsing. I wonder if that's going to be purely based on the original turbulence noise. If this is way smaller, do we get smaller ones? No, not so much. Kind of wish we could get that to be almost like a frame behind. I feel like there's going to be a certain uniformity to them in the soft body. If we put these to 0, we already saw they would crumple up a lot, but does that individualize them at all? Not as much as I thought it would. It's not terrible as far as a little bit of chaos. And then, let's see, what if we do some plastic deformation? We'll do an elastic limit, so that's constantly breaking and keeping its new position. Visually, it's not going to do too much. Yeah, these are just at the whim. Oh yeah, with no structure, that wouldn't even do anything. Like, it has to have some flexion and some shear, otherwise it can't break. But I feel like if we suddenly turn off these, you see what I just did is by doing the plastic deformation, when it crumples up, it'll keep the crumpled shape because we are plastically deforming it. It's got some strength to it, and if we push it beyond 5 degrees, then it's like stuck in that new position. So here it's kind of free to bend, but as soon as there's no forces being applied, then it's like, okay, well, I'm stuck here. So, you know, it's a crumple-esque thing. Now, I told it to follow rotation to a very large degree, but clearly this is still able to super-duper spin around. I just think that's not much of a variable. Oh, also, look, this turbulence, this turbulence is not doing much. Almost everything that's happening is just that little bit of variation. It's this turbulence, or this our field force that's doing the feedback loop that's actually doing all of the braking here. So good to know. Let's see. I'm just trying to look at the resolution of that. I'd really like it to be super duper individual, but they seem to be strong enough to hold. Feedback loop. So if you were to do that and slow it way down, I mean, I feel like there might be something kind of wrinkly. What's cool is that this is just you know, these effectors. We can put this on any geometry. So while we indeed do have a lot of crazy random kind of, you know, it's flipping around all over the place, with a couple of springs, possibly, we could calm that down. Let's give that a go. Obviously, there's different ways of doing this. This is just the one that kind of popped in my head as something cool to do. So there's a new spring. I turned on snapping, so snapping the points. I'm going to snap over to that corner. And let's do this as minimally as possible. So this spring wants to see that plane not on the center of mass, but on an offset. I don't even know if the offset makes sense. Maybe it does have to be on a point. So easy enough to find. We just go, oh, we're already on the correct point there. So that's going to be 1 point. Set the rest length. Cool. Another spring. Snap that to the opposite corner. And that one will snap to -1. So there's now a spring here and there. Let's see if those can hold them. So hitting play. Whoa, explode. All right, good time to save. Crumple. This is not surprising. Springs are notoriously twitchy. So under dynamics, expert. A good number I found for springs is 25. Let's give them a little bit of length. Yeah, so that's enough for them to hold. And yeah, it's actually doing a fine job of holding those two corners. And as mentioned, if we turn off the turbulence, these are plastically deformed, so those should, you know, kind of hold their deformed shape. Now, let's try going a little easier on our structural. Because if things can't bend, that might stop certain... Oh no, that makes it much worse. Well, now, yeah, you can see certain things doing something. Well, I mean, the feedback loop concept works. We had to do it in a slightly roundabout way, but it does work. All the stretched polygons. That's interesting. Like, the structure that we had here was actually really good. Because you see how little it moved when those weren't there. Turbulence. Feedback. I wish there was less uniformity between them. I'm trying to think of any way. What ends up happening is they start becoming quite uniform. You see how these overall we get these nice big smooth shapes. And I don't want that. I wish that they could be a little more individualized. But we kind of got this negative feedback loop where the shear and flexion, we want high so it stays in this crumpled state. But if it's very high, then they can't individually deform. And we saw even if we go down to 1, I feel like we'll see a difference. Yeah, you see that they are a lot smaller in what they're able to do, which is neat. And then 0 is the crazy one. If we go down to 0, now they're going to be able to like super... I guess there's not a huge difference in this case. I guess these numbers are pretty high at this point. 22. So yeah, I don't know. Brink. The how much do they look like they're crumpling? I mean, I'm holding those points in the corner, just out of curiosity, just for fun. Yeah, that's a pinching in a very particular way. Different scale. Oh, stop being so uniform. You know what? I don't know if this would work, but here's a weird thought. What if I deform those points that are coming out from behind it on the tracer? That'd be weird. That could introduce some crazy randomness. So random effector inside the tracer. I would like it to deform 5 by 5 by 5 on the points. So let's frame by frame this. So now you can see that these are getting deformed. So they're slightly, they're following behind, but they're also getting deformed. So they might end up on the other side. And let's see. Yeah, look at that. By forcing the variation in, look at look how much more crumpling we get out of that just by heading that variation in. That's cool. So yeah, look at that crumpling. That is a pretty nice crumple, pretty random, and we're not even using a specific like attractor. So along these lines, first of all, let's crank this up a bit. We still want to run relatively quickly, so I won't go any higher than that. Let's we don't even need to go too far. Let's see what we get. Like those are all bending and then they begin kind of just pulling in on themselves. So that looks pretty good. Let's have this go to frame 45. So all ways we cache this out, but the quickest way is let's just bake it to alembic. What do I want? I want to bake as alembic. Shouldn't take too long. Maybe it starts exploding at a certain point. As the individual polygons start colliding with each other, it's going to go slower and slower and slower. Possibly it's exploding. I should have gotten a few frames lower, but let's just let it power through a little bit. See if we get anything good. Just checking out the chat. Okay, cool. Let's see if that came through. Yes. Okay, so that we now have an alembic. So this is like crumpling up super duper quick. But now what's cool about this is the point count doesn't change, meaning we can change the play speed. So we can drop this down to 25% and then get them wrinkling slower. I mean, we can go infinitely slow on this. So that can begin like really wrinkling up, and we can stop it at any point. And you can even do it on offset, which is awesome. The offset is great because we can keyframe it at the beginning. Let's go to a time of 0, keyframe, and then say we want it to end on 120. And just push this as far as we want. Am I doing that wrong? I thought we could just offset. Oh, okay. I wanted to turn, there we go. We turn off animation. This is what I actually wanted to keyframe. So at the time of 0, and then at the time of 120, I want this to end wherever I want it to end. Let's say we want to end there. So that's the animation. I will turn this on for a moment and kill off that. Okay, so now selecting these, I can open up our, actually let's just do it from here. Right click, animation, show F curves, and then we get this. And where's our value at? What? Give me my frame. Well, that's odd. Why, it's not giving me the ability to see that, but we might be able to create ourselves a special property track. I would like a, not time track. How do we do this? We have a time track. I want to add in a time track. I don't know if it'll work here. I'll create a null. Drag in the null. Or maybe not. Okay, there's the null. I would like the null to get a time track. And there's the time. So if I there we go. I wanted the handle. So yeah, pretty much is what I want. I want to have it super duper ease out. So if that is the time track, can I do that? Can I add that in as a time track? So I just dragged in that arc into the frames time track. And if that does work, then hope would be this crumples in relatively quickly and then it's going to super smoothly fade out. Seems to have kind of worked. Oh, I think I know. It went extra long, and I think I know why. Because the... Where's the null? This null's time track went all the way to 330, so I wanted that to actually stop at 120. Yep. Like that. Like that. So now it should stop around that time. Yeah. Didn't ease out as smoothly as I wanted it to. If we can get that to smooth out, but what's wrong with it? What is wrong with you? Like without a frame. Yeah, we need those keyframes in there. Those need to get remapped. But then it just stops dead. Maybe that... I don't know. How does that... I don't do time tracks too often. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong on it. Relative mapping? No, it still stops dead. Well, it's just a question mark for me. I don't know. I don't know for a fact what's going on. The value did go to... the value went up to 115. That might have been the problem. Come on. Yes. Okay. I pulled it up to 115%, so it can't go above 100%, so it was just hitting a ceiling really hard. Okay. Here's the point. I was able to do that simulation. Tobias is saying that we could try pose morph. The why pose morph wouldn't work here is that like the halfway point here is not the halfway point between the end and the beginning. Everything is doing something totally unique on every given moment. So you don't want to do it with a pose morph. Like, yeah, that would get you to the final state, but it's getting there in a much more visually interesting way. So anyway, this is a totally arbitrary crumpling, but now we were able to get whatever this particular geometry to kind of crumple up into the state. Now you can imagine that this could have been those flower petals, and we could just say, okay, crumple up, and then make it stop and do whatever you want at any given moment. This bit of geometry is whatever we want it to be. We could even, I mean, just for the, why not? I'll quickly Google just a flower and we'll project it on there. So flower. Images. Setting, no, tools, usage. Whatever, Creative Commons. We just need a flower. That one was good. Beetle Waters. Not great. That'll do. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to do this in a really dumb way because my Photoshop's not opening right now and I need to figure it out separately. I'm going to save that image. Nope. This is going to be tricky. I thought I can't save that. And I can't screenshot. And if I try and open up Photoshop, it says error reading machine specific preferences. They will reset to default. And then it yells at me. I can't even move it over to the screen. It says a scratch disk is full. I can also change scratch disk by holding Control Alt as it opens. Dang it. Well, yeah, I just Crossfader. I just wanted a flower with an alpha. You know what? I could probably steal one from the content from the asset browser. I bet you. Yeah, I'm gonna just see if I can steal that one. Petal. Oh, nope. Looks like they did a nicer job with it. They projected it and all that. Yeah, I mean, the specifics don't matter. You guys know what it would look like if we put a material in there. And we can subdivide it. I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good crumpling. I really like. I wonder if we could, couple things. I mean, that worked well. I like this. I will give that a save, but let's go and save as a B. And let's see if we can do it without having to do the alembic step. So if we just take that original, if we hit play, you see we're going to get the crumpling happening very quickly. So that's fine. If we begin to just keyframe these down, can we get it to chill out? So let's say it goes all the way up to this point, and oh yeah, there's no shared parameter, so I have to do it individually. Keyframe the strength. Keyframe the strength. We'll go just a few frames further. Set it to 0. Set it to 0. So now there is no alembic. Let's see what this does. Crumple, crumple. Now it's weakening. Weakening. I mean, of course, we're losing our real time, but that's if you bake everything out. But I just want to see if it chills out. Now there's no strength being applied. There's still a lot of collisions, and it's still drifting because it is still a dynamic object. But yeah, it mostly calmed down. Yeah, I kind of dig this this tracer trick. I wonder if we can do it without the turbulence. If this isn't moving at all, and we have turbulence, if there's being traced, but then those traces get deformed, yeah, it seems to happen. This initial turbulence isn't even needed because we're already taking any points that are just at 0, 0, 0, but then each individual point is getting randomly deformed into a new position. And we end up with pretty crazy chaos. If we turn off this random, let's see if we get anything. Oh, look, they're naturally forming a spiral. That's why we kept on getting that shape. Without the randomness, whatever little imperfection or drifting that we are getting naturally formed into a spiral. Deform that just a little bit, though. And we get this. Stylistically speaking, this is going slow because they start colliding. I think if we turn off self-collisions, this might run quickly. They'll pass through each other, but not that much more quickly. A little bit, though. It's not slowing down as we keep going. This will just start passing through itself. But I was just curious of any options we have. Currently, I believe this is set to random, which is good. Random means that every single point is being randomly moved. So this might not work because if we change it to noise, then we could start introducing patterns. Like larger and smaller patterns. Oh, yeah, random's a very particular thing. Well, that clearly is different. That's a spiral-ish thing again. Let's lower the scale down. Again, spiral, but different. As we get smaller and smaller, each one is deforming a little bit. And eventually we get the deformation. Yeah, it looks like the total random is the best one we can get. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are... We could probably deform it in different ways and get it to introduce different patterns. But just for this inherent chaos that we get out of the gate with no extra deformation, like, that's pretty cool. I like it. I like it. Yeah, once it was kind of baked down to alembic, like you can imagine putting it like the reference. As long as you know, this is but you can put a different material in there to make them bend around, and then they have these twisting on the different stems. But I feel like the crumpling would be the tough part, and then we just did a really advanced crumple. I think that there's a lot of potential in this concept here. Nice. And that's on top of, like, yeah, we still have all the different soft body effects. So it's still trying to keep the structure. So those are still, it's maintaining the surface, like, area. They're not stretching and they're not squishing. They're just bending. And then if we did turn off the turbulence, it'll keep that crumpled shape. And as I had mentioned, this is not even attempting to do... Like, there's not an attractor here. They can't pull away. So if they try and pull away, they'll just not. So the only way they could go is in. So I think that's why we're naturally getting kind of them all pushing inward. I don't know. I'm pausing on it because it's a cool technique. And there's a good chance we'll end up using it again in the future or possibly in some sort of tutorial. Oh, you're replying to somebody. Travis, I think you could probably bake directly to the cache. I don't want to bake the entire thing, so let's just go to frame 45 and bake, and let's see if we can time remap just the dynamics tag. How to open a banana. That's you'd have to have every part of it like already separated. Would be really cool to do a vertex map growth for the transition of the texture. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I wouldn't mind trying to do this from the edge in or something. I'm not even sure if it's possible, but anyway, we've got this. And yeah, use local data. So that is now cached. So we should be able to just scrub and do this. But I could be missing something, but I don't see any parameters for retiming this. Yeah, there's no time remapping here. Oh, you have to remap the global dynamics cache? You wouldn't want to do... I mean, I wouldn't want to do that. Oh, yeah, you have this. And we'd probably have to do a global cache to do it. Oh, wait. No. Oh, let's do something weird. Excuse me. Interesting. Well, yeah, you could cache everything, but I kind of like the alembic one a little bit more. The Speaking of it, you're talking about dissolving it from the edge in. Let's see if we can do that from the Alembic file. So it's already kind of baked, but let's try and like art direct this a little bit more. You see it's crumpling everywhere uniformly, but let's do a little bit of a transition here. So here is our, I'll make it editable. We've got a baked version of it. And I want to deform it. I think we have to use a morph to do it. Yeah, a morph seems like the right way to do it. Let's see if it works. Pose morph. I want to affect the points. The pose will target the alembic. I don't want to see the alembic. Let's go to a future frame. Yep, okay, it's already seemingly working. So let's go to animate, and now, yeah, now you can see I can transition from one state to the other, and it's still going to be animating, which is cool. If I push it up all the way, we'll still see it through the animation. But now, if we put a morph deformer as a child, I would like that to look at the pose morph, and now that's controlling it. And then we give it a fall off. Let's do spherical. And now, yeah, now you can see that it is only doing the crazy crumpling in the center. So if we stretch this, I mean, so we could have that go simultaneously to stretch out as it plays. So it's going to be crumpling and getting bigger as it goes. So that could be cool. Alternatively, remapping, invert. So now, oh, invert. So now that's going to crumple on the outside, and as I shrink it, it can slowly go to the center point. Yeah, so both can happen at the same time. Might be a little bit better with a, because of the, you know, we're working from a plane, so maybe making it square is a good idea. Yeah, it's pretty cool just to get that pinching up in the center. Of course, by doing this, we are stretching the polygons. Like, they are not perfectly uniform, but it does give us a nice level of art direction. Jiggle. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. So let's get less stiffness, less structural. Not much. It's very smooth though, so let's double the effect. Is it doing anything? Yeah, something. Not much. Yeah, okay, yeah. Now the jiggle is definitely doing something. I mean, I'm not saying we would want to keep it alive, but you can definitely see it kind of keeping it alive. It'd be neat. There is no way, but it would be neat if we could have the animation transition. We're only in one state or the other. We can't make time progress per point, which would be madness. Yeah, that way lies madness, but it is just a transition of the state of it. So we have one that's animating and the other that's like, well, how much of you am I taking on board? Makes sense. Let me think. Yeah, that makes sense. What was I going to do? I feel like there's something I was about to do. It's pretty crazy, though. We just have the entire thing deform, or we could just have part of it deform, or we could add some jiggle on top of it. It's a lot of layers to get some pretty cool control out of it. Baking as Alembic is a really great addition to cinema. Just be able to have it appear directly in the scene. Makes everything run really quickly. Thinking... I'm just trying to think if there's any additional details to put on here. I think it's pretty neat by itself. This should be able to be put into a subdivision surface. Gets nice and smoothed out. Very nice wrinkles. Yeah, we're getting away from the crumple, especially it's not going to be very crumply if we put the jiggle on there. Remapping, invert. Yeah, just having the edges shrivel like that, I think that gives it that plant effect just a little bit more. If we increase the minimum a bit. See, I'm super confused by this minimum. Why does it push out, but then it pushes in? It's strange. But anyway, pushing... once again, that's just... The min has never made sense to me. But anyway, inside of the morph, we could just feed in a solid. Give it a solid. And then... Now it's going to apply a little bit everywhere, but mostly on the edges. So that gives you that nice outside wrinkle. So yeah, a lot of things to do there. Pretty cool. I feel like this is something that we should explore more in the future, maybe in a bonus live stream. Speaking of which, I'll save this file because I think it's pretty cool. I guess I'll leave it like that, just so there's something to see when you hit play. Speaking of bonus streams, if you are following on Patreon, then you get access to the bonus streams. We've actually been in the middle of modeling out some cool diamonds. I'll pull those up again. XSplit does seem to be behaving a little bit better, which I'm pleased with. Anyway, check this out. What we've been doing is every Tuesday we've been working on the next gem cut. So we've been essentially making one of these every Tuesday. So I started with the diamond, and we've been working our way through. Yesterday we made... Oh, not enough memory. Uh-oh. Well, I'm starting to get out of memory issues, so I'm thinking I should probably stop the stream before I run completely out of memory. Maybe one of my drives is full or something. But, yeah, so we're going to wrap this up quick. So, yeah, this is... The diamonds, we've been making different materials for them, and I'm going to be working on the next one on next Tuesday. Should be fun. But now I'm worried about the memory issue, so I'm going to go. But thanks, everybody. I'll see you on Tuesday for that bonus stream. Otherwise, I'll see you next week for the regular Rocket Lasso Live. No guests, just another regular episode. So bring your questions. And definitely, down below, there should be a link to the newsletter. Sign up because we got a really cool new plugin coming out very soon. You'll want to see it, so sign up there for first word. But other than that, that should do everything. That should be a time to say goodbye. So bye-bye, everybody. Oop, now the ad's not popping up. Ooh, did it freeze? Nope, now it's going. Bye-bye.